we're back with another episode of Split Take. Chandler, where do you want to start off this week?
Should we just go through a very brief rundown of what we watched?
Sure.
Because I got some things on here that I know you like. So I'll go quickly. I rewatched The Social Network. Perfect masterpiece. Amazing.
Great movie.
I watched Mon Oncle, the Jacques Tati film.
You did.
Which is kind of, I think, despite the fact that I rated it lower than Playtime, I think I like this more than Playtime because I think what Playtime was lacking for me was any semblance of a narrative. Mon Oncle doesn't have much, but it has enough.
It has a narrative, and I think it has more humanity, or at least warmth.
Yeah.
In a way that is important. That I think really kind of rounds out Tati's work as a mime.
Yeah,
his visual
Hulot and his relationship with his nephew, I thought was really cute. Yeah, and the house is fun.
It's an adorable
little
film.
Fun.
Yeah.
The inconvenience of convenience. Great. I watched A Simple Plan, which are you aware of A Simple Plan?
No, I do not know.
So
at all.
Okay, it's a Sam Raimi movie. If you're a fan of either Sam Raimi or the Coen brothers, I think it's evident that they kind of went back and forth from like the mid 80s to around early 2000s. They kind of did a lot of the same things. Blood Simple has a lot of Evil Dead in it, and then they made Raising Arizona, and then he made Crime Wave and the Evil Dead 2. There's a lot going on between them. Their films echo each other in a weird way. They stylistically, they're pretty similar. And A Simple Plan came out right after Fargo. And it takes place in a snowy Midwest small town. It's about 3 people who find a suitcase full of $10 million. It's got Bill Paxton, Bridget Fonda, Billy Bob Thornton. It's just it's a little Fargo-esque thriller. It's very restrained for Sam Raimi. It's very similar to Fargo. And I feel like no one's ever heard of this movie, and it's really good.
I most certainly haven't. Where'd you watch it?
It was on Amazon Prime. I rented it because I was very curious. I watched The Sound of Metal. I know you're trying to find more 2020 releases. I definitely
it's on my list now.
Definitely recommend this. It's very, very good.
It was not on my radar before, but after you talked about it and then Sanju watched it and also liked it.
Very good.
I will be giving it a watch very, very soon.
I watched Kicking and Screaming, which was Noah Baumbach's first feature film. Right out the gate, he has insufferable assholes with pretty relatable problems. It's not his best, but he knew what he was about. I watched The Trotsky. Have you heard of this?
I have heard of it. In fact, there is I think, lessons from the screenplay.
That's where I heard of it. I was trying to figure out where I heard of this from because I'm looking at the Letterboxd activity.
Or it could be just right.
Yeah. Either that or
one of those script writing channels talked about. It was in the episode they talked about Paddington 2.
Oh, interesting.
It was scripts where the main character doesn't change.
Yeah.
And how to make that work.
Well, the general premise is that this kid thinks he's the reincarnation of Leon Trotsky, communist writer.
It's a marvelous premise.
It is. It's arguably based, but it's pretty funny.
I've been wanting to watch it for a while, so was it good?
Trotsky was good. It's got some weird stuff in it. It's a really good script, but it's not as good of a filmmaker made it. It's not super inventive or creative or crazy. It doesn't make too much of a full use of its script. But interestingly enough, one of the directors, a Canadian director named Jacob Tierney, and he's one of the main cast members of Letterkenny. So that was a little fun. That was a little fun thing. I rewatched Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Hilarious.
Of course.
It's great. It's funny.
I've realized I have not watched a Coen Brothers movie in a long time.
That's what I was feeling too.
Maybe not one the entire year.
Oh, wow. It sounds like you need your yearly rewatch of No Country then.
It hasn't been yearly the past couple of years.
No. I watched Paterson. This is a good movie and you should see it. The thing about
it's on Prime.
Yeah, it's on Prime
watch list. and I've been meaning to. It's like one of the very first things I ever added to my Prime watch list, and I've never found the night where I'm willing to press
Well, the
play,
thing
but
is,
eventually.
uh, all of Jarmusch's movies are like quiet and meditative, and not much happens. But this movie is about how nothing really happens in life, and you kind of have to find the little beautiful details from day to day to make your existence worth living. And it's very cute. And the only thing that Jim Jarmusch ever created that was close to what you could consider a villain is the bulldog in this movie, who it's a bulldog that Adam Driver owns, and his name is Marvin.
Oh, that's marvelous.
It's great. It's great. And finally, this is something that's on my letterbox, not on my letterbox, but I just got done watching it. I watched Secret Sunshine earlier today. Yeah. Yeah.
Your second
Lee Chang-dong.
Right? Second Lee Chang-dong?
Yep.
Oh, what did you think of So I think I might have mentioned Secret Sunshine on this podcast because I think I rewatched it this year.
Yeah, you did. April of 2020.
But I don't know.
I checked.
Yeah, I liked it a lot more the second time. What are your thoughts?
Because I woke up today, and I'm like, this is the day that I'm finally gonna rewatch Burning. And I thought, I've been rewatching a lot of stuff lately. Let's watch something new. So I watched Secret Sunshine, and
this is an acceptable exchange in my mind.
Is it? Okay. Well,
yeah.
Okay. Again, my opinion of Burning has gone up, but I can't definitively raise it until I watch it again. So as it currently stands, I like this more than Burning. I feel very lucky that I knew nothing about this before I went into it.
Nothing at all.
Nothing at all.
Yeah, it's a bit of a trip. I'll just say that you have to look for that sunshine hard.
Yeah. Well, because it takes about 40 minutes before the thing happens. And when the thing is happening, I'm like, the thing isn't happening, is it? And then the thing happens, and I'm like, oh, okay. Where do we go from here? Interesting.
It's interesting. What was it? I'm thinking about like I Saw the Devil, the other South Korean film. Where like that's like a similar kind of starting premise.
Mm-hmm.
But the two directors, Lee Chang-dong and God, I'm blanking on his name. They just take it wildly different ways. So like one is exploring just the inner psychology of a mother, and the other one is exploring violence.
Well, yeah. The thing is, so I watched this, and right before we started this, I was watching the features that are on the Criterion edition on the channel. And Lee Chang-dong strikes me as being like a Korean version of Michelle Haneke in that.
Yeah. I see it. Yes.
In that they're both just kind of, oh God, there's no music, no score really in this movie. It's just voyeuristic camera work that kind of captures the unraveling of people in real time in a way that on paper shouldn't be interesting, but really, really is. And ironically enough, the main character in this movie is also a piano teacher who kind of loses her mind. Yeah.
Yeah, you got a connection there. It's all of Lee Chang-dong's movies, but especially Secret Sunshine. I really love them. I love them a lot. I love Burning a lot, as you know, but it's so hard to recommend.
No, it really is.
Especially Secret Sunshine.
Yeah.
Like, who do you recommend this to? Why would you do that to someone?
Well, that's the thing is that, Secret Sunshine, once the plot starts getting into, gear, I won't spoil it, but, an event occurs, and at first you're like, oh, is this going to be like a crime movie, like a kidnapping movie? And then you're like, oh, no, that was over pretty quick. That's okay.
It's not a crime movie. It's a crying movie.
Yeah. Also, Song Kang-ho simping pretty hard. Love to see that.
Oh, I always forget Song Kang-ho. He's pretty great in that.
He is pretty great in it. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. That's another one. Yeah. I really like it. I don't know when I'm gonna watch it again because that was a lot. Very good.
Yeah, it's one of those criterions that I I feel like I should buy because I like it so much and I've watched it twice.
Yeah.
But why would I buy it?
The cover's nice. There's that. And I now have
Nothing
to
to write
make
home about though.
I now have to make a revision to one of my lists on Letterboxd because I didn't know this is also a 2007 movie. Stacked year.
Ah,
I always thought it came out in like 2013 or something. But yeah, that's pretty much what I watched. I'm gonna take a break from movies for a few days after Secret Sunshine.
I want to run an idea by you,
Hmm.
but I was looking at the guy who does YouTube channel, the Royal Ocean Film
Yeah,
Society.
he's great.
Andrew Saladino.
Was he
So on Letterboxd, I've seen some people do this. He doesn't use half stars.
Yeah.
And the reason why I find this out is I'm like, why? Quite often I find myself, why have you given this movie 3 stars? This is clearly a 3.5 or 4 stars.
Mm-hmm.
But then it becomes a little more understandable when you're only dealing with 5 ratings and you don't have the smaller increments to do that. And then I was wondering to myself, maybe I should get rid of half stars and just migrate everything into just full 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5 stars.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on
I
that?
thought about doing this multiple times before, but it would just take too long. But
yeah, see, with me, the amount of work is almost an enticement.
Yeah.
Because I like spending all that time on Letterboxd.
Well,
I don't know.
It's definitely something I've thought of before, but like, I don't know. There would be movies where I'd feel guilty not giving it the. I don't want to have too many 5 stars. I guess that's my issue. Because I don't know. I like the 4.5 a lot. I have a lot of 4.5s because the thing about I feel like every 5 I've ever I have started as a 4.5, and then over time it grows to a 5. I very rarely give 5s on my first watch.
But there's weird things where like you have to decide whether you're bumping something up or you're bumping it down.
Yeah.
And I feel like most of the time you're bumping down if you were to consolidate. Particularly like a 3.5 stars is probably a 3.
Yeah.
The rating then becomes 1 star is worthless. 2 stars is just a bad movie. 3 stars is fine. It's a good movie. It's okay. 4 stars is good. And 5 stars is a great movie.
Mm-hmm. But that's weird because
it's strange.
That's the thing is that like that I have the same thing, but like, a 3 and a 3.5 are the same thing, and a 4 and a 4.5 are the same thing, but a 4.5 is like 4.5. If I say a 4.5 star, it's one of those things where in the back of my mind I'm like, oh, I should watch that again and see if it's a 5, or what is stopping that from being a 5. I don't know. It's interesting. I know some people that even do it like they mimic the 4-star review in Letterboxd, so they only rate their things from 0 to 4.
It's really like the 4.5 stars, which I find that's the one I can't give up. The rest of them I can.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like the 3.5, I went through the list. And was like I can put all these fairly confidently, demote them down to 3 stars or put them at 4 stars.
Yeah.
But they're 4.5 stars because that's the one where I'm like, this is a movie that I know is really great, but it's not necessarily something that 100% connects with me.
Yeah.
A lot of those kinds of movies.
Well, that's the thing is that,
like, I can't give this 5 stars, but I can't give it 4 stars. That'd be wrong.
Well, that's what happened yesterday when I finished Paterson. I was just looking at my Letterboxd for like 10 minutes thinking, is this a 5? I feel like it is a 5. I want to bump it up to a 5, but I didn't. So it's at 4.5. And now the thought of it bumping down to 4 in the wake of this new system just hurts my feeling.
I think the clear answer here is to just create a whole nother Letterboxd where that one's operating on a 5-star system. And I'll update it concurrently with this
No,
one.
what we have to do is just get rid of all the ratings and just be one of those people that only does like or doesn't like.
I hate them.
Yeah.
Thanks. So I've been watching a lot of screwball comedies lately. Some good old Cary Grant. What?
I don't know. That's just funny to me. Did you watch The Cat in the Hat? That's a screwball comedy.
Cinematography done by
Chivo.
Chivo.
Yep, Chivo.
Don't know if you know that. Fun fact. But I watched Trouble in Paradise, which did you say, was that the one that Slavoj Žižek really
Yeah,
likes?
Slavo says that's his
Or is that
favorite
a different?
Lubitsch. This Trouble in
Okay.
Paradise.
I can see why. There's some very interesting class commentary going on in there, which
Interesting.
is a pretty good movie. I'm honestly surprised in a lot of these 1930s movies about how obsessed they are with class and wealth in a way that we I don't think I see
Well, to be fair,
often.
it was the
Like,
Depression.
right, and that's why I find it interesting. Like a lot of them are taking place, a lot of like the action is taking place in very wealthy settings,
Yeah.
but it's often people rebelling against that, which is interesting.
It was a
Because I
base.
watched Trouble in Paradise, I watched Holiday, which has Cary Grant in it, and that is also uh he's like a poor guy marrying into this super wealthy family,
Yeah.
and then he realizes that he doesn't want that kind of life. Interesting narratives, like multiple of these kinds of movies from the 30s. I also watched The Awful Truth, another Cary Grant film. Not as class conscious, but it does have some money,
Cary Grant is the guy
themes of
from
money and stuff.
His Girl Friday, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And To Catch a Thief.
Which reminds me, so I'm redoing my my favorite movies list,
Yeah.
and what I'm adding some movies that I wasn't sure about.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm doing essentially for the rest of the year is I'm going to try to rewatch some things that I've been watching this year. So I just rewatched Cure last
I
night.
saw you bumped it up.
And
Is it still on the Criterion channel?
It is still on the Criterion channel. Yeah. Cure will probably make an appearance on my new favorite movies list. I will probably be giving Topsy Turvy a rewatch.
Oh.
That has a decent chance of getting on there. But there's some other stuff that I've only watched once that I want to revisit, like Cary Grant in Arsenic and Old Lace, which is just a silly movie. But I just think about it all the time because I think it's one of my favorite comedy performances.
Interesting.
And that might get on my favorite movies list. So I'll be watching that sometime soon.
I just did mine too. I made it from 30 to 50.
Yeah, I think I'm going to expand on the number of movies on that list.
Although everything after 30, I didn't order properly. Really, the only thing I can say is in the correct order is my like top 20.
The farther away you get from your top 10, the more, at least for me, the less sure I'm about each particular position.
Well, I also had a movie that we watched earlier this year break my top 20 or onto the favorites list, and that was Naked. Naked is at 16, right below The Treasure of the Sierra Madre and right above Porco Rosso.
And yeah, I'm not sure. I watched a bunch of stuff, but I don't have anything in particular to say about it.
Well, hold on. I'll be the judge of that.
So
be quick. I want to see if there's anything. The Elephant Man.
It's good. It's kind of a sweet David Lynch film. It has a lot of his typical stylistic stuff, but it's clearly not like fully within his vision. That being said, it's kind of long and it loses its momentum early in the second act, but it picks it up later, like in the
It's weird
around like the 2/3 mark.
It's weird because the lynchiness of this movie arrives in such weird sporadic spurts, where like it'll be 20 minutes of like drama and then it'll get dark and then you'll hear electrical sounds and the camera goes all whooshy and you're like, oh, it's David Lynch. I forgot.
Oh, that's right.
Oh
yeah, it's an interesting anomaly, kind of like half one foot in the Lynch world and one foot
atmospherically it's very Lynch, but everything else just feels, I don't want to say Oscar baity because it's a little more than that, but it's not. It's fine. It's perfectly fine. Not as good as Dune, but it's pretty good.
Dune is an event.
That was it. Shall we get on to our first movie?
Yes, I think we shall.
Dick Johnson is Dead.
What a title.
Misleading title. Misleading title.
It, I just recommended it to my dad, and he gave a little chuckle when I told him the title. Like, oh, that's right.
Yeah.
And it's kind of euphemistic.
Yeah, a little bit. A little bit.
So I wonder, like, now I'm curious, is like, what does he think it's about? Like, just based on the title,
Dick Johnson
what
is
is
dead.
someone's guess? Yeah.
There's another movie that came out this year with the word Dick in the title.
Yes, Dick Long, The Death of
The
Dick
Death
Long,
of Dick Long.
or something like that.
That's interesting. 2 movies with the words death and dick.
Maybe they're a double feature.
A prequel to Dick Johnson is Dead.
So Dick Johnson is Dead. It's a Netflix documentary. It is about a filmmaker who her dad is growing older, getting Alzheimer's, forgetting things, and it's the story of her coming to terms with that and of reenacting or creating scenarios in which her father dies.
Yeah. Have you seen her previous movie?
I have not.
She did the documentary Camera Person.
Yes, I've heard a lot about that,
Yeah.
and it's on the BBC
It's got
best movies of the 21st century.
Yeah,
list,
it's got a
maybe?
nice criterion
guess.
that I wanted to get for a while.
I am curious to check it out though.
Well,
now,
yeah,
after this.
I definitely will because I did like this. I like this a lot.
It's a pretty good movie for 2020. Like, this would be a kind of a run of the mill. I don't want to say that, but it kind of just fade into the background on a normal year. But
yeah.
since this is we're very starved for things, this is one of the better things
The thing
I've seen this year.
this movie on paper it's really messy because I don't really know what this movie's trying to say. It's less about something than it is about someone. It's essentially a documentary. It's almost like I don't want to say it's a eulogy because he's not dead, but it's essentially this filmmaker capturing the essence of somebody's life. But at the same time, it's not really about his life. It's also about Alzheimer's and how that affects her. So it feels kind of messy as to what it's trying to say and what it's
also about film a little bit, like the nature of that. They talk to a stunt person in the beginning, and they talk about how she never watched movies when she was growing up because they were Seventh-day Adventists.
Yeah.
And my biggest disappointment of the entire film is she mentioned how the first movie she watched was Young Frankenstein, and they didn't cut to a clip of Young Frankenstein. I was just I just wanted to see a joke. I wanted the release of seeing that on screen. But alas, no, I had to look it up myself.
But that's the thing is that it is technically messy, but I love
it lacks structure.
Yeah.
And I think that's my biggest issue with it is that I was about an hour through where I was like, this feels like an hour and a half. I feel like we're wrapping up, and we weren't. It wasn't because I felt it was too long. It's just I didn't have any sense of like where the narrative was going, mostly because the film is more exploring the whole concepts, and it kind of goes into tangents, and sometimes it returns to those tangents and sometimes it doesn't. But it could have been a little more.
But the thing is,
concise.
The reason I don't mind is because Dick Johnson's a lovely man.
He's the centerpiece of the show here, and it's clear why. Because like from the first scene, you see him. He's the dad you always wanted, and you might have, or you might not.
He is what everybody should strive to be.
As an old
just a
dad.
person in general, he sees.
Yeah, that's true.
He sees the beauty in life, in everything. The beauty in people, the beauty in life. He's just kind. He wants to help people. He's a wonderful man, and I'm glad he didn't die.
I was getting kind of like American Kiarostami vibes from this movie,
especially the end.
About how like it is, it's mixing reality and fantasy together, and exploring both, using the other as like a counter position. And it's interesting that like we're talking about how Dick Johnson seems like this wonderful kind of guy, and it's kind of all fake, but it's not.
Yeah,
like it's a documentary that kind of lets you in on the fact that it is a bit constructed at times and a bit not. It's strange. It's certainly like the best thing about the film is that it gives you a lot to think about,
Yeah.
obviously about death and stuff like that, but more than just that, like the nature of filmmaking, the nature of documentary, and like getting to know someone through film and how that the film manipulates that. And there's a bunch of other stuff, but
Yeah.
a lot
The the,
just thinking
the
throughout the whole
Alzheimer's
thing.
stuff I found to be especially powerful. It's like when they're showing clips of like her mom,
Hmm.
and she states how the only video I have of her is her in this state. Just
That
crazy.
makes you think.
Oh yeah, it makes you think.
Like it when you're watching that scene, I literally had that as a note. It was just like you can't help but think about your own life and like,
Yeah.
do I have video of like if my parents were to just die or leave tomorrow, what would I have of them?
Yeah.
So lots of moments like that
And
come
the
up
the
when you're
scene where
watching
he
the
has
movie
to do
because
the
it's
memory
universal.
test,
Mm-hmm.
which
Do you whenever you see memory tests on film, do you try to like
yes, I do
do
all
the
the
test
time.
along with them?
And that's the thing is
Good.
that like I could only get a few of them. I couldn't remember it word for word. So, I mean, I had an easier time than he did.
Yeah, yeah. But it's the one thing about like okay, so clearly the main theme of the film is death, and I think one of the great unfortunate reality so it's a documentary, so it's exploring real life, and
Mhm.
the unfortunate aspect that works in the movie's favor is that the film is about her parents, one of which is already dead.
Yeah.
So you have that perspective. You have then you have Dick Johnson, who is clearly not dead, and you have the perspective of watching a parent die.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting that there's was it the woman who made the cake, the fudge cake, near the beginning
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
the movie, and
A lot of fudge cake in this.
spoilers, I guess it's
Yeah.
not really a spoiler, but she died. Um,
Yeah, they do like
so
a little
technically,
freeze
you
frame
also have
thing.
someone who has died during the making
Yeah.
of the movie.
Exactly.
So death in multiple stages uh,
The long
kind of
goodbye, as
influences
we
the
say.
entire film, and uh, you can approach it from different angles in that way,
Yeah.
and the
Another
film does.
scene that was really hard to watch was when they had to take his car away from him. That was heartbreaking to
It,
watch.
I think the biggest triumph of the movie is getting you in the position of being the parent or
Yeah.
being the one dying, because often you're thinking about, at least from my perspective, that my mom took care of my grandma who was at the end unable to take care of herself.
Yeah.
So that's the perspective I'm most used to, is like looking at the person who is like losing their mind, losing their ability to control their own life. And the film kind of gets you into that headspace and gets you to empathize with that particular scenario, which is it's good. Like that's something that I feel more people you don't have the option really. You're so wrapped up often if
Yeah.
it's a personal thing, if it's your own life, you're wrapped up in your own feelings towards the situation. And so the film kind of lets you experience it from the other direction of losing your the world around you.
Yeah. I also have the added benefit of have you heard of the album Everywhere at the End of Time?
I have not known.
So there's this album that's kind of gone viral over the past like year or two, and I got really into it at the start of my quarantine. It's a 6.5 hour album. I didn't listen to the whole thing,
That's great.
but it's a 6.5 hour album that essentially through music simulates the feeling of Alzheimer's. Because it starts off with like this dreamy swing type music, like the music that would play in the ballroom in The Shining. Yeah, that kind of music where it feels echoey, but it feels nostalgic. And over the course of the 6.5 hours, that kind of music slowly, like static noise and like syncopation and giant gaps of just noise between the actual songs start to creep in, which simulates the feeling of you like losing hold of your memories. And the only things that occasionally poke through are those brief feelings of warmth that you get from a memory. Where the end, it's literally like by the 6th hour, it's just like droning, scary, atmospheric static with the occasional like allusion to a swing song that plays. And I haven't apparently the way that you're supposed to listen to it is just to sit down and listen to all 6.5 hours, and by the end you fully experience like how this sound starts to morph into something horrible. And at the end, right before it ends, like an actual the song plays again, but it's got all this stuff on top. But it got me into this rabbit hole of Alzheimer's and stuff like that and how it affects the brain. And then this comes along and it does a really good job of like showing that stuff off. But it's a lot to think about, especially the stuff with
Who? I mean, one, I appreciate the fact that someone has created a 6-hour song to simulate
album.
that.
It's multiple.
Well, okay, song, sure, whatever you want to call it. At that point, it's a song. But who has time
I don't know
to watch it?
well, that's the thing.
Listen
Who
to it in
has time
6
to watch
hours.
7-hour movie?
This is true.
Yeah.
I very rarely watch 7-hour movies in one sitting.
War and Peace is the closest thing, but that's not a movie. That's a mini series. Come on.
I haven't even watched. I don't think I could watch Fanny and Alexander in one sitting.
Yeah, that's like what?
Could probably watch
4,
it in 2,
5 hours
at best. It's 5.5.
Yeah,
almost.
exactly. Some people do it.
You can. Anyway, Dick Johnson is losing his mind, but he's wonderful to watch.
He's a lovely man, very charming man. He has an infectious optimism that I feel if it was about anybody else, it wouldn't hold my attention for nearly as long. And it's one of those things where, we've been talking about this in our group chat. Somebody that we know wants to make a film that's essentially their therapy session put to film. And this is kind of what it is. It's very therapeutic in a way. But it captures this man's life and his personality and his outlook in a way that informs a lot of what's happening around him. So it's not completely without structure.
The benefit here where this works is that I feel like the footage itself.
Yeah.
Because it's clear that there are 2 types of footage in the movie. There's footage that was her name Kirsten?
Kirsten Johnson.
Yeah. Kirsten, footage that she has shot herself at home with her dad. Maybe there's a crew there, but it's kind of small and it's just like actual moments in their life. And then there's like actual like studio production stuff.
That's the fun stuff.
Yeah.
It turned out better than most therapy projects do.
Yeah. Oh, so it seems like a lot of it was created in editing. Like this was a project maybe a couple years ago. She started filming a lot of this stuff with her dad, and that there was a narrative that was built up after they got into the editing room and then maybe went back when later on and like, okay, so now we're going to film some of this stuff to kind of round out this narrative about coming to terms with death.
That's the thing though. That's pretty much documentary filmmaking in a nutshell. You make those movies in the editing.
Yes, but it's obvious. Like the way that this was put together is a bit more obvious than it usually is.
Yeah.
You usually can't tell like how things were kind of pieced together in post-production, but this seems very much like that kind of movie.
Yeah, it's just, it's short, it's brief, it's charming. It makes enough allusions to bigger ideas while not really committing to any of them, but not in a way that feels frustrating.
Yeah. It's universal stuff presented in a unique way.
Yeah.
And I almost wish there were more fake Dick Johnson deaths. Like that's what I knew going in, that there were they were going to pretend to kill Dick Johnson, and there's honestly not that much of that.
No, but if anything, those are the parts I didn't like as much. I liked the stuff they do in the soundstage. I think those are really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Really visually interesting, especially the 2 dancers who have the big fat heads of them as youths. I think that's really an interesting image.
It's really, there's a lot of really fun shots, especially like when Dick Johnson first dies and ascends to heaven.
And I think the most interesting thing is that the funeral at the end, the mock funeral. Because I think that's, if anything, that sort of encapsulates what the movie's about, where his friend is giving his eulogy for a man he knows is not dead. but he gets so wrapped up in the moment that he lets his genuine emotion through. And that's the thing is that,
Which,
well, it's like he knows that day is going to come, and he knows that day is not today, but he can't help but like feel those emotions because the inevitability, like, it gets closer with each day.
yeah, I was kind of skimming through the film earlier today just to refresh my memory
Yeah.
on some of the points. And it's interesting that earlier in the movie, there's he gives essentially an interview, like he answers one or two questions, and he's in like a makeup room, like a behind the scenes kind of room. So it's interesting thinking about that, another like behind the curtain kind of thing, like making you think about that moment later on in the film is like, oh, how staged was that pretend funeral, or how staged wasn't it, or like what was real, what's not. Anyway,
Yeah.
more kind of
Well, that's
metatextual
the thing is that most
filmmaking
of
stuff.
the people in the funeral, you can tell that like they, they're not taking it very seriously, but it's those people that have to speak, the ones that actually have to like face these ideas head on. Like
Hmm.
his friend who's giving the eulogy, and that woman who like tells the story about how her husband died and how Dick came to help. You can tell when those people actually have to like, bring up the a notion of it that they sort of crumble. It's very interesting, like social experiment. But the thing is, it's just a small chapter in a very strange book. All the parts were fine. There's no part that was, you know bored me or anything, and
No, there's nothing wrong. It's a great exploratory movie. Gives you lots to think
it's
about.
ambitious.
Could have used a little bit more structure and kind of
Yeah.
narrative oomph.
But there's also a charm in this sort of free flowing nature of it all. It's
Yeah,
very unique,
yeah.
very unique.
It's universal. It's important. It's good.
Ironically enough, it leads into our next movie because, speaking of documented nonsense,
Speaking of things with no structure, I that was also a note. I'm glad to see we're starting on the same
yeah,
page.
y-
So
y-
our next film is, do are we moving on,
yeah,
or
we're
do you have
moving on.
any final
We're moving on.
parting thoughts for Dick Johnson?
Well,
Here's to many many more years, Dick
I'm
Johnson.
here's hoping.
So our next film is from the BFI Sight and Sound 2012 list. I believe this is on the critics side. I don't know why it would be on the director's side. Yes, it's most certainly. Actually, it's on both.
Oh, interesting.
Fun. This is the movie Sans Soleil. I'm sure I butchered some part of that, whether that's the beginning or the
Yeah.
end. The title translates to Sunless. It is a travel log, documentary, video essay, collage
Yeah.
of various things. It's footage of parts of Africa and Japan and a few smatterings of other places, set over a woman who is reading letters, which are fake, but you can't tell that while you're watching. So
This is another one of these it's like a subgenre of movie that I like to coin the term as cutaway movies, where in a show like The Simpsons or Arrested Development, if like, if you have a character who's watching a very heavily artsy movie and you do a cutaway gag to like the artistic nonsense of what they're watching, it's this kind of movie. Like you could literally do a cutaway gag of like The Simpsons and you insert this movie, or like The Color of Pomegranates, and I would not be able to tell you whether or not this is a real movie.
the interesting thing about this is that this is it's a documentary in the most loose form. I don't know what this is. This is a Frankenstein's monster of a film. I don't mean that in any negative or positive way. I
Yeah.
mean it's literally like just entirely constructed.
If an English major got a hold of a warehouse full of Nat Geo B-roll, this is the movie they'd make out of it.
And it occupies a special place because there are two documentaries on this list, on the BFI list. So after we get done with our thoughts on the film, I think we should address whether, like short films, whether or not documentaries have any place on a best movies of all time list. But I have seen Sans Soleil before. Um, I This filmmaker also did another movie called La Jetée, which is also on the BFI list.
Yeah.
Much I'll just spoil that one. I really loved that one. I was like, I want to search out uh, something else that the director has done. Chris Maker, I think is the guy's name. And so I found Sans Soleil, which if you've ever seen the Criterion, they're together.
Oh, okay.
La
I
Jetée
didn't know that.
Sans Soleil. They're very different movies. Very similar, but also very different.
Okay.
La Jetée is not a documentary in any way. Although it does use stock footage. So I guess they're a lot similar. Anyway, I was not thrilled watching Sans Soleil the first time I watched it. I was a bit more on board yesterday.
Yeah.
I've been reading a bit of philosophy lately, so maybe that's why. Maybe I'm in the headspace of willing to listen to a lot of this stuff.
I don't want to give you the impression that I didn't like it, because I did like it, but it's bullshit. I like it, but it's fucking stupid. The thing is, so the letters are fake, are they not?
They are. It's if you watch the end credits, which you don't need to, but it says like letters from what's his name? Sandor Krasana, which is an entire made up name, and the very last credit, like after every single credit, it just says created by Chris Maker. And that's the only real, other than the woman who narrated it, I think.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is that the letters, they have a lot of beauty in them. The way that they're written, they're very literary. They're very well written, and the accompanying video is very well shot. I love movies that can just take me into places that I've never been and capture the feeling of everything, the small details. And I especially like the parts in this movie that were in Japan, Tokyo, where you can see the weird little things, such as like Japanese advertising, which has always piqued my interest, cat shrines and stuff like that. And stuff like that interests me.
A lot of the movies in Japan.
And then we take a 10-minute detour to some sort of bestiality museum. And then I'm like, wait, what's going on? Oh, now we're in Africa. And you're like, oh, okay. And that, before you know it, we're looking at a city sunken in ash, and now the credits are starting. It's another thing, like it's like Dick Johnson, where I like every individual element. I just don't know how well it all comes together to say something.
It's one of those movies that requires perhaps too much of its audience to make meaning out of it. And it is perhaps one of the most unique films ever made. Like we're both big fans of F for Fake, which is kind of a similar concept, but they're very different. And I'm like, this no video essay is quite like Sans Soleil. Nothing is quite like this film. And the way that the letters in the film are addressed is like, he once told me, he used to write me, ... like the way it's like this unique feeling that you cannot get anywhere else. And I'll say the film's biggest draw is that kind of unique sensation it gives in the way that language is used differently, very poetically. The film, the clips itself, the variety of kind of like stock footage, documentary-esque footage, stuff like that, that's all like weaved in. And it's essentially kind of like an exploration of culture.
Well, yeah, because that's
with some philosophy put in there.
That's one of the things that I feel like it did right. Is that one of the things that I got from it is it sort of broke down the ridiculous nature of just how like ritualistic we are as a species. Looking at so many different practices and customs and what they mean and how strange they look all paired together. And then you compare it to like how animals work and stuff like that, where that's what, even though I just like made fun of that, I liked that they had like taxidermied animals recreating like sex positions, because it does It
So
links
fucking
the
strange.
animalistic way that we do things.
But it's hard to like. I feel like that's the most obvious example of this in the film, where it's hard to concentrate on what the point
Yeah,
the film is making, because the visual
it's
is so strange.
yeah. And not only that, but once it's I feel like as soon as it starts to get at something, it just goes in a completely different direction on a way that it almost I don't know, because I don't know how this movie was made, but it feels like to me they assembled a bunch of documentary footage, spent a good amount of time writing accompanying voiceover for this footage, but didn't know how to connect the footage in a way that felt realized or pointed.
Yeah, no, you are right. It felt a lot more cohesive on my second viewing, at least in its. It feels very James Joycean in the way that James Joyce writes stream of conscious, where it's just
I just bought that, by the way.
thoughts are popping into your head, and the film is very much going on like, here's one tangent, here's something tangentially related to that and to
Yeah.
that, but it is all ultimately kind of thinking about and talking about culture and culture over time in terms of like history and the death. Death is another kind of
Yeah.
theme in the film. Progress. Um, there's a lot of little, like Dick Johnson is dead. A lot of stuff that's very interesting to think about. And the film, the mileage you get out of the film is directly proportional to how willing you are to actively think about what it's trying to
Yeah.
say. Um,
It's also got a great CGI giraffe. Incredible.
my favorite was the statue of JFK that looked nothing at all like JFK.
That's the thing, is I'm like struggling to remember what was even in this movie. There's a few standouts, like the town in Ash, and the sex museum, and the train, and the cat shrine. But yeah, it's a very odd movie.
Yeah, there's some. It's a work of philosophy, I think.
Yeah.
Probably what it is. It's like a documentary philosophy.
But it's
I
also
don't
one
know.
of those things
There's some
where
interesting
I
lines.
applaud the
Yeah,
fact that it exists.
it's one of those things where I can't be too angry at it because it's so interesting, just because of what it is, of how it's expressing itself, how unique that is, and the fact that I don't think anything's ever come close to like touching exactly what this film does.
Yeah. I I don't want to judge it too harshly, because I feel like it's one of those things that, just like you, when you watch it again, you might get more out of it, because it's offering a lot to think about, but it's offering it at such a pace where I can't keep hold of my own thoughts.
Yeah. The I think the most interesting part of the film, that it talks about a lot of stuff, and I feel like the overarching thing is like the interconnectedness of
Yeah.
things, of cultures throughout places and times and history and all that kind of stuff. But the stuff that I found most interesting this viewing is like the nature of memory and images, of both of like collective societal memory and uh your personal memory, of like how do you remember stuff if you don't have an image to correspond with that.
Hmm.
And the film does take a lot of time to kind of explore that in different ways.
And I feel like it also emphasizes the fact that, human beings are all preoccupied with the same things, death and
Mm,
loss and maturity, but we all explore it in different ways. It's one of those movies that,
yeah,
I feel like a more ignorant person might just watch it and think, oh, look at these people, they're so weird. But the more and more you think about it, you can look at any number of traditions that are present in the movie and be like, oh, we have our own version of that. Like you said, it's a culture.
yeah, yeah. Some interesting quotes I wrote down just to share. One of them was like, on the theme of memory, how can one remember thirst? It's a great like idea. Like, how do you like remember a feeling,
Mm.
like, such as thirst? Um, history only tastes bitter to those who expected it to be sugar coated. You know, stuff like that. Get you thinking. So here's the question.
Yeah.
Here's our discussion on one: does it deserve to be on a list of the greatest films of all time?
I'm gonna say no.
Okay, I think I will also say no, but that is a hesitant no. Because typically I'm the one who's very like adamant. Like if it doesn't have, if it's appealing to such a specific small portion of the population, then what's the point?
Yeah.
And I feel like the audience for this film is so minuscule. Uh, the film is almost liable to be forgotten if it wasn't in the Criterion Collection or something.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like I felt a bit more affinity for it this time around.
I'm glad.
I think
I'm glad this movie exists, and I like it enough. But
I like it enough. Do you think documentaries have a place? Should they be on a separate list?
I think they should be on.
They? Okay.
Because it's sort of like, it's not as similar, but you could ask, like, do animated movies deserve to be on here?
But the difference there is that a documentary is based in reality,
but it's still telling a story,
or theoretically. It can't, or it could be an exploration.
Exactly. I don't know. I think documentaries, if anything, I feel like there should be more documentaries on here. I feel like documentaries have everything to offer that movies do. Narrative features. It's just a different genre to me. They're feature films, regardless of their presentation. Like something like F or Fake. Would you agree that it should be on here?
Yes.
But do you consider that a documentary?
Yes. It's a strange film.
Exactly.
Doesn't really fit easily into any category like a documentary, but it is.
Well, because the thing is
trying to tell a story based in
most documentaries,
but also false.
I don't want to say they're not good, but they're serviceable in that they tell you exactly what you need to know and let you judge for yourself. But the really, really good documentaries almost make a story out of the material they have. It's something like F or Fake, or The Act of Killing, or Dear Zachary.
I think
stuff like that is what I think really great documentary filmmaking is, and that's the kind of stuff that should be on this list.
Yeah, my issue is not so much documentaries in and of themselves. Like, I think they do belong here, but at the same time, it feels strange only having 2 of them.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure, like, I'm very torn on this. Like, it feels like there's so little. Like, if we're getting rid of Soleil, like, if we're both agreeing that doesn't quite deserve to be here.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're left with one documentary. That just feels strange.
That just feels like
surrounded by all of these.
It's a token pick.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah,
it deserves the genre deserves more.
That's what I'm saying. Put more on.
But I'm not sure like how it would deserve. Like I don't foresee any other documentaries getting on here. The Act of Killing is the only one that comes close that I think.
Hoop Dreams. I know you haven't seen
I suppose.
But Hoop Dreams is quite literally the best documentary I've ever seen.
Which the idea of like having a separate list for documentaries is almost like, it's not saying they're different, it's just giving them a separate space to be recognized in, because they're being drowned out by all these narrative features.
Yeah, because it says it's the top 100 movies of all time. It's not narrative features. Are there even any animated movies on the list?
There are not. And that's deeply upsetting.
It is. Oh, so yeah. I think that I still think short films should not be on the list, but I'm all for it.
Okay. You heard it here, folks. You heard it here first, folks.
We are a pro documentary podcast.
Yes, we do not discriminate unless you're a short film.
Yeah, get the
In
fuck
which case,
out.
you can get the fuck
Get
out.
out of here. Unless you're Wasp or I don't know what else. What other good short film? We had a whole podcast.
Well, we're going to talk about La Jetée, which is a short film, technically. It's a long short film.
Okay.